Imagine going back in time with me about 3 decades ago. Imagine sitting on a bus, getting from one place to another. Imagine not holding a cell phone in your hand, not looking at your email or text messages, not even reading a book or a newspaper. Imagine that you are just sitting on the bus and staring out the window. For most of my teenage years and my early 20s, this is what I did for several hours each day. As soon as I sat down on a bus seat and looked through the window, my mind would leave the here and now to wander freely in my own mental time and space. Sometimes my mind would go back to the here and now and look at people on the bus around me. I wondered what their thoughts were like. From the outside, people looked so static, idle, motionless. Is that what their thoughts looked like from the inside as well? And would it be better for these people's mental health if they could all be transported somehow several decades into the future to a time when everyone's brain is constantly engaged with some screen or external activity, working hard on some task? We often hear admonitions and advice for healthy aging, such as the following advice you may have seen circulating on the internet. Never let the brain idle. An idle mind is the devil's workshop, and the devil's name is Alzheimer's. But is this advice backed up by science? And what are the best ways to exercise the brain? These days, instead of sitting on the bus wondering what people's thoughts look like, I get to put people in the fMRI scanner and observe their brain activation during various modes of thinking. I have seen firsthand that difficult thinking tasks activate people's brains more than easier tasks that require less thinking. So thinking hard in an effortful fashion is important. But what happens in the brain when people are lying in the scanner or sitting on a bus seat with no particular task to do? It may seem like not much is going on in our brains during such times of quiet rest and wakefulness, when our thoughts just seem to drift effortlessly. But one of the biggest lessons from neuroimaging research was also one of the biggest surprises to us as neuroscientists. The brain, far from being idle during rest, seems to be at its most active. When people lie in the scanner, their bodies might be at rest, but their brains are getting a huge workout. Although this came as a surprise to neuroscientists, it was of course merely a rediscovery of something poets and philosophers had known for thousands of years. As Seneca remarked in 62 AD, long before neuroimaging was invented, the fact that the body is lying down is not reason for supposing that the mind is at peace. Rest is sometimes far from restful. But another surprising lesson for us as neuroscientists was something Seneca didn't know about. It was the discovery that brain activations during rest do not occur randomly throughout the brain, but are consistently and systematically localized to particular parts of the brain, what became known as the default network. What defines the default network is not that its regions are anatomically connected. Some of them are, but some of them are not. What defines the network is that its regions are functionally connected. The fMRI signals in those regions fluctuate together, going up and down in concert. And these signals are at their highest at times when we are not engaged in an external task, including times of supposed rest and outward stillness. So what happens during rest to make our brains work so hard? And why does this seemingly effortless flow of thought give the brain such a workout? To answer questions such as these, I have been focusing on studying phenomena such as mind wandering and other spontaneous forms of thought. We know that 30 to 50% of thoughts are not about the here and now, and that the mind is always in motion. We have found that even in people with many years of meditation experience, a new thought arises spontaneously, on the average every 10 seconds, but often more frequently. We have also found that when the mind goes off task, the brain is highly active, more so than when the mind is on task. And these activations occur not only in regions of the default network, but also in executive brain regions. But what is mind wandering? Is it just going off task? Although most of the research so far has defined mind wandering as thinking about something other than what I'm currently doing, I believe that mind wandering is much more than that. In my most recent work, I have argued that mind wandering is instead a manner in which the mind moves. Just like we could wander in physical space, moving freely from one location to another, when the mind wanders, it roams freely throughout our own mental space. And such freely moving thoughts are very common. We have found that 30 to 50% of waking thoughts move relatively freely, and that this freedom is not unique to mind wandering and waking thought. It's also present during nighttime dreaming, when our thoughts move even more freely than during waking mind wandering, and it's also present during creative thinking, especially during creative idea generation, when we let our minds roam freely in order to get to unexpected places. So the research I've been involved in suggests that all of these phenomena are forms of spontaneous thought, during which the mind moves with at least some degree of freedom, and during which the default network is highly activated. Which brings us back to our question: what are the best ways to exercise the brain? Unfortunately, neuroscientists don't have the exact prescription yet. What we do have are some initial clues that those times of quiet contemplation and wakeful rest, when we let ourselves daydream and mind wander, seem to enable a mode of functioning in the brain that would otherwise go unused. This mode of thought seems to actively exercise our default networks, which is also the part of the brain that dementia and Alzheimer's hit first. So the next time you're waiting at a doctor's office or sitting on the train with a few minutes to spare, maybe you would resist your impulse to check your phone or occupy your mind with some task from your to-do list. Maybe you would decide to stave off the negative voice in your head that says, "Stop daydreaming and get something done instead." Maybe your brain was getting something done, setting your own mind in effortless but active motion and getting one of the forms of exercise that it may need to stay healthy.